All right, thank you very much. I can already go to the next slide. So first of all, welcome everybody from Lisa and myself. We are the co-chairs of the SETAC ACLCA Joint Interest Group for LCA here in the North American region. And a very warm welcome also from our steering committee members, which you can see at the bottom of the slide. And if you're familiar with the North American LCA community, then you will probably recognize most of these names. First, a little disclaimer. The views expressed in the presentations that you're going to see today represent the opinions of the authors and shall not be misconstrued to represent or imply any endorsement by any of the affiliated organizations, including SETAC, ACLCA, and most importantly, EPA. Now, I just wanted to give you a quick background on a brief history, so to speak, of how we got here. So the SETAC North American LCA Interest Group was established something like 25 plus years ago. I couldn't find someone to tell me the exact year, but it was in the 90s. ACLCA was founded about 20 years ago. So they existed in parallel for quite some time. But in 2019, we realized that there is a lot of overlap, both in terms of topics or interests, as well as in terms of the people. So Lisa and I worked with ACLCA and SETAC to have the interest group function as ACLCA's technical committee. So from the SETAC interest group on LCA, it went to the SETAC ACLCA Joint Interest Group on LCA. And here we are mostly concerned with methodological topics. And at the end of 2020, we issued a call for volunteers, first for working group chairs and then for working group members on certain topics that were prioritized by the interest group's steering committee. As a result, 8 working groups started their work either in Q4 or Q1 of this year. And today you're going to see the first of recurring biannual status updates webinars, which means not every 2 years, but twice a year. And also, I want to make it very clear that the working groups are still open for volunteers. And if you're interested in any of these topics, then you can contact the working group chairs directly. The flyer is on the interest group's homepage. So if you Google SETAC LCA interest group, you can find the flyer at the bottom of our homepage. And when you mouse over any of the chairs' pictures, then you can send them an email directly from the PDF.
Hello, I am Ashley Kruger, and I will be providing an update on the Circularity and LCA Working Group. I am one of the co-chairs, along with Michael Seidani. Including Michael and myself, our work group has 20 members. We have contributing or active members that can dedicate 3 to 4 hours a month to group tasks, and we have observing members that join calls and provide feedback. Our group is made up of mostly members from the private sector and then a mix of academia, public, and NGOs members. We are looking for case studies on how circularity is being applied in your organization. Please contact us if you want to participate or have questions on the goals and objectives of our group. The Circularity and LCA Working Group is motivated by 7 key points. Adopting circular economy approaches can contribute to achieve a significant number of sustainable development goals, such as number 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Adoption of circular economy principles in product design and development can have a significant positive influence on sustainability. It has been estimated that approximately 80% of product environmental footprint is determined during the design and development process. Design for circularity is an emerging field that needs new integrated frameworks, such as methods, tools, and indicators to help establish and monitor innovative solutions across sectors in line with the circular economy paradigm. Joint agreement, shared by academics, industrialists, and politicians, is needed to provide circular economy-related indicators at different systemic levels to facilitate and catalyze this transition. In the last few years, many circularity tools, metrics, and indicators have been developed. However, there are over 100 unique definitions of circular economy. In addition, there are an increasing number of circularity indicators used to measure the circular economy. Finally, LCA practitioners are trying to incorporate circularity into their studies, but there are limitations in end-of-life approaches and lack of clarity on the utility of the existing circularity indicators. The Circularity and LCA Working Group was formed to solve the following. There are an increasing number of circularity indicators and lack of clear guidance on how to assess the circular economy. LCA methods and software do not provide clear guidance and approaches to including circular economy pathways, measuring impacts, and defining system boundaries. Circularity indicators do not always provide insight on the environmental savings or benefits of implementing circular economy principles. The Circularity and LCA Working Group aims to clarify the existing circularity and LCA end-of-life indicators, understand the trade-offs of circularity and environmental sustainability, determine approaches for evaluating the environmental impact of circularity, and develop case studies to apply these approaches. To meet the mission of the working group, we have organized into 4 subgroups. The first is focusing on developing a literature review to clarify the existing circularity and LCA end-of-life indicators. The second is analyzing existing methods to determine approaches for evaluating the environmental impact of circularity. The third is developing illustrations and examples to explain the trade-offs of circularity and environmental sustainability. And the fourth is working with other subgroups to develop case studies to apply approaches and lessons learned. The desired outcomes and deliverables of the working group include a decision tool for determining appropriate circularity indicators, a user guide on circular economy and end-of-life methods in LCA, guidelines on circularity impact assessment to supplement the LCA ISO 14040 and 44 standards, and finally, sharing of results via a journal article, presentation, and communications through SETAC. Our working group has begun meeting monthly as a group and as individual subgroups. At our next meeting, we will hear the status update from each subgroup and discuss how to collaborate across groups. Our plan is to have the work group's individual packages completed by the end of the year, including the use cases. Some existing and expected future challenges include coordinating and engaging a large working group, collaborating across subgroups to avoid duplicated efforts, and incorporating the subgroup work packages into the desired final deliverables. Thank you. Hello, my name is Ashley Kruder. Sarah Cashman and I will be providing a status update on the intersection of LCA and indirect GHG emissions accounting working group. Our working group is led by Sarah Cashman from ERG and myself, Ashley Kruder from Ramball. Including Sarah and myself, we have 6 working group members. The majority of our members are consultants, with some members from industry and academia. More volunteers are welcome. Please contact Sarah if you are interested. Our working group is driven by the demand for better indirect emissions inventories due to their inclusion in organizational and community climate targets. LCA is often used for indirect inventories. However, the use of LCA methods and data is inconsistent and lacks comparability. We aim to develop a review of LCA methods and data types for indirect emissions accounting to serve as a guiding resource. We hope to highlight the importance of LCA approaches in GHG reporting for apples-to-apples comparison. We also hope to alleviate the perceived level of effort to quantify Scope 3 indirect emissions using life cycle methodologies and data.
Our current working group scope includes 7 tasks described here. Our first task will be to develop a protocol and matrix to track our literature review results. So this is really the planning stage of our analysis. As an outcome of task 1, we'll produce an Excel matrix template and protocol for conducting our review. Task 2 is really the meat of a lot of the work, which is to conduct the literature review of available standards, databases, tools, factors, and corporate sustainability reports to determine current LCIA methods and data types relevant to Scope 3 and indirect greenhouse gas accounting. Because we have these different types of sources, we've divided up the responsibilities by working group member. So this has been a good way to involve the different members of the working group and have specific outcomes expected from each member. As an outcome of task 2, we'll complete the matrix from task 1 and also summarize the most relevant sources to carry through for the rest of our analysis. Under task 3, we'll also be developing and distributing surveys to ACLCA and SETAC members, hopefully, to voluntarily provide information regarding how their organizations use life cycle assessment in calculating Scope 3 GHG emissions. And as an outcome of task 3, we'll compile our survey results to see the different ways that LCIA is valuable in Scope 3 emissions and potentially places where LCIA could be used but is currently not being applied. Under task 4, we'll develop recommendations of use cases for different types of LCIA data, such as process-based data, environmentally extended input-output data, hybrid approaches for Scope 3 GHG emissions accounting. We'll summarize these use cases in a short 2 to 3 page document. So tasks 1 through 4 is really reviewing the information and coming up with some concrete findings. The task 5 through 7 includes documenting the data gaps and needed next steps, especially from the LCA community to support greenhouse gas accounting. And tasks 6 and 7 include preparing a journal article and conference presentation summarizing the findings as well. Largely, again, drawing on the information collected in the task 1 through 5 stage. Here is a look at our planned schedule for 2021. The working group has been meeting every other week to discuss progress. We've already completed the review protocol template in early March, and we've started the review process, and we hope that will be completed by this summer. At least the initial complete matrix, and we may have some iterations on the matrix. We've also started the questions for the surveys to ACLCA and SETAC members, and we hope to coordinate with these organizations in the next couple of months to distribute the surveys and then be able to compile the survey results by this fall. We're also be looking to develop the use cases as we comb through the review information and summarize our use cases of the different LCA data types for GHG accounting. The first main challenge that thanks very much for listening to this update. Thanks very much for listening to this update.
to reiterate, I've inserted the letter S, very importantly, in life cycle assessment in a broader discussion around life cycle sustainability assessment. And the impetus of this was due to, as mentioned, that running 2 graduate programs at Harvard, one in general sustainability, and then more recently, one in global development. And so started that program about 2 years ago, and it brought me into a community of people who are working at the United Nations, particularly this one organization, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, executive director being Jeff Sachs at Columbia University. So the graduate program that I run, which now has more than 50 students, in addition to the 300 I have in sustainability, is focused heavily on this aspect of sustainable development, hence this connection to the sustainable development goals. And so at this point, again, I'm looking to not only solicit a co-chair as part of this effort, but also, of course, volunteers as well. And so the mission that I'm looking towards is basically establishing life cycle sustainability assessment linkages to the SDGs to support achieving the targets of Agenda 2030. Now, there have been efforts through the UN Life Cycle Initiative, and I am aware of those. And a couple of things here. One is context in the Americas, and I think that that's incredibly important because there has been lack thereof connection to the SDGs by and large in the United States. To a greater extent, Canada has provided some linkages, and even more so in Mexico. So that said, a North American perspective is important here, because as a developed country, we still have many issues related to sustainable development. Now, that said, when one takes a closer look at the SDGs and Agenda 2030, which the SDGs is basically the greater delineation of what the targets are associated with Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 is about action related to eradicating poverty. And so what's really important about this particular project or this working group is to really not only make these linkages, but also even to bring broader awareness of what the SDGs are truly about, and even in some regards, if you will, common definitions around sustainability and what sustainability means. And the definition I provided here from the United Nations around what is poverty. And poverty is not just the lack of income and resources. It's about just fundamentally denial of choices and opportunities in society. And as we here in the North American region of the world, we have been bearing witness to many issues related to social justice that affect all of us in all levels of economic levels of capability. And so this mission is founded in that this definition around what can we do in this world of life cycle sustainability assessment, provide, if you will, support for decision-making as it relates to Agenda 2030. And in this fundamental aspect of eradicating poverty as part of that, we need to think about that more deeply around these connections. And so a colleague, or I should say someone that's in my community orbit around sustainability here in the Boston area, is David Cash, who's the Dean and Associate Professor at the McCormick Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies at University of Massachusetts. Wrote this publication, journal article in 2003 around efforts to mobilize science and technology to support more sustainable products, systems, et cetera. And I draw that here because I think it's a reflection of what we need to think about as part of this life cycle assessment or life cycle sustainability assessment community in being relevant. And that's the point here. the point is that, as David Cash points out, is we need to think about being salient, that is relevant to the issues that we need to solve. And to some extent, the two other items, credibility and legitimacy, are fundamental to life cycle assessment. In other words, we are an organization that is science-based. We are an organization that looks at an unbiased view of results that are obtained, and then also are respectful in the communication of those results to basically support decision making. Secondarily, there's been work at the ISO level, and many of you are probably aware of this, that now all new work item proposals need to be need to have some level of identification on how they support the SDGs. So that, my last point here, the thrust of this working group is related to continuing to be relevant in the field of sustainability. So there's a broader mission here, and not just the identification of linkages, but also some level of understanding of how we in the LCA community are related to the ever evolving, if you will, field of sustainability. And I'd like to present two things here. One is, again, if you look at the ISO website related to ISO 14044, you see that they've already identified that our standard that we all base our work on predominantly is related to SDG 12, which is sustainable consumption and production, and SDG 13, and that's it. And I would say easily posit that when we look at life cycle assessment, and particularly life cycle sustainability assessment, we have far more reaching connections to the SDGs, all 17. And as I've even shared with Chris, a little bit of frustration and trying to articulate all of the interconnections that the SDGs have with each other. And this is work at the University of Bern Center for Development and Environment, which is a wonderful website, and I will be sharing my slides. But this website it's an interactive website where you can click through each one of the interactions or interconnections, I should say, linkages between each one of the SDGs to get a broader sense of what they are. So one can look at SDG 12 and see that there are several connections across the board in the other SDGs. And so I think that there's some basic work that needs to be done to support current research in what are these connections around the product systems that are developed with the other SDGs. And so this project is to basically, to some extent, maybe manifesto is maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but I think that we really need to frame or at least attempt to frame our field as it connects to the SDGs in this aspect of the main and primary goal, that being eradication of poverty and a greater awareness of where we are connected to poverty alleviation. And then with that, basically create a roadmap as to how we're going to get there. What are the current connections? What are the critical issues we should be looking at? And then with that, present that within our own community, and then look to publish not just within the journals that many of the ones that we read, whether that be the Journal of Cleaner Production or LCIA or Industrial Ecology, but really a broader reach. And really the mission here being that creating a larger level of awareness to the communities that are working in this area of development. And so with that guidance as an item here being one to look at the commercial sector, civil society, academia, education, and research. And as Miller just posted, that yes, there's IGES that has the linkages tool. And so also looking at the methodologies that look at, well, right now there's Likert scale, if you will, measures of how things are complementary or how they might be at odds with each other, such as we look at economic development and further development, in many cases it'll have aspects of ecological trade-offs. And that's one of the grand challenges that we have as in terms of sustainability. And then lastly, I think it's really as important as we all, I think, have benefited in the efforts of establishment in international standards. I think that there's a room to have technical specification at a minimum that looks at the linkages and looks at the ontological representation, that being the linkages in and of themselves, is hugely important. So not much to present in terms of the schedule, other than I'm just getting started in terms of a roadmap document. What you're seeing here is a summary of the things that I've been thinking about and pulling things together, and that really tried to get to the next level of presentation in our ACLCA community, and then things to be determined further. So my primary challenge is, of course, is to identify a co-chair, a fundamental, if you will, almost reframing of life cycle sustainability assessment as it relates to the SDGs. This is as I put together my presentation for today, I really think that there is a fundamental aspect to this, and what it may mean to shape our field in the future. And I don't say that with hubris. I say that as I think that we really need to continue to think how we relate to others in the broader and absolutely growing field of sustainability. And then looking for empirical examples and those working in the product social side evaluation. There's quite a lot of work there, but also be aware of the exogenous influences, that being the climate change agenda. Again, here in the United States, we've seen the Biden administration last week put out some very bold goals. And so the climate change agenda will be a major discussion. But with that, the Green New Deal, or if you will, aspects of job creation, will also be a major part of the discussion in sustainability as we move forward, being that we don't want to leave people behind. We don't want to create, if you will, larger gaps in income inequality. Again, things that we normally don't think about in this field of life cycle assessment. But if we are going to engage in the sustainability field in a salient level, these are some of the things that we really need to begin to think about. And then lastly, the pandemic. And the pandemic is not going away in the near future. We will still be affected by that and the various things that are related to the pandemic as we look at, again, the goals of the SDGs are being influenced greatly by that. And of course, with all the problems here with these in addition to the jobs we normally do, is I think bringing along as many people as we can is really important. That being looking outside the LCA communities will be fundamental first part of this, and time management, getting these things done in a timely manner, that we do continue to work towards saliency as part of that. So Debbie, Chris, and Lisa, thank you for the opportunity of speaking this morning. And again, anyone interested, I welcome your assistance.